In the quiet moments when you pause to reflect, away from the flashing notifications, the algorithmic seductions, and the constant hum of superficial stimulation, you may begin to sense a subtle weariness, an exhaustion not of the body, but of the mind, a heaviness that drapes itself across your thoughts like a fog you cannot name, and if you sit with it long enough, you'll realize that it is not merely fatigue, but a symptom of something deeper, something that has been eating away at your mental clarity, your vitality, your ability to feel alive and whole. We live in a time where it's easier than ever to feed the mind images, videos, opinions, trends, crises, pleasures on demand, but almost no one is asking what we are actually feeding it. Or more importantly, what this constant diet of digital noise, instant gratification, and emotional manipulation is doing to the very structure of our brains, the very core of who we are when all the screens are turned off. Because what most people don't realize, what perhaps you haven't fully allowed yourself to admit, is that every choice you make in terms of what you consume mentally, emotionally, and neurologically is not just influencing your mood for the day, but is quite literally rewiring your brain, shaping your future habits, your emotional regulation, your depth of thought, your ability to connect with others, and even your capacity to experience joy without needing a screen to produce it for you. Let us begin with a hard truth. Your brain, the most sophisticated biological system known to man, is not neutral when it comes to stimulation. It is programmable, plastic, and ever-adapting. And whatever you repeatedly expose it to, especially under the illusion that it's harmless, becomes the new default operating system for how you live your life. And if that operating system is built on a foundation of quick, dopamine hits, scrolling endlessly through curated fantasies on social media, numbing yourself with mindless entertainment that asks nothing of you, escaping uncomfortable emotions with instant gratification, then what you are actually feeding your brain is a slow poison disguised as comfort. A counterfeit pleasure that leads not to satisfaction, but to depletion, dependency, and decay. Most people believe they are simply tired, unmotivated, or too busy, but what they are really experiencing is the long-term consequence of a brain that has been hijacked by artificial rewards, engineered stimuli that bypass the natural pathways of meaning, challenge, and growth, and instead offer a shortcut, a sugary substitute that never truly nourishes, but always leaves you hungrier. You see, the architecture of your brain evolved over millions of years to reward you for real things: solving a problem, connecting with another human, creating something meaningful, persevering through difficulty, resting after labor. But in the modern world, these deep, organic pathways have been overridden by technologies, habits, and substances that offer all of the reward with none of the process. And the result is a brain that is overfed but undernourished, stimulated but not satisfied, connected but not truly present. And perhaps the most dangerous part of all of this is how invisible it becomes over time, how normalized, how silently destructive, because you don't see the damage the way you would with a broken bone or a bleeding wound. Instead, you wake up each morning a little less energized, a little more foggy, a little more restless, and you call it aging or life, when in truth it is a slow death by 1,000 mental cuts. Let's talk about dopamine, the molecule that underpins much of this trap. Because dopamine is not what you think. It's not the chemical of pleasure. It's the chemical of anticipation, of motivation, of the brain saying, "Do that again." And while in a natural setting this would lead us to hunt, build, create, explore, and connect, in the modern environment, dopamine has become a slave to artificial signals that are engineered not to help you grow, but to keep you addicted. Every time you refresh your feed, your brain releases dopamine, not because what you saw was meaningful, but because the possibility of something novel, shocking, or validating was present. And this intermittent forcement, this unpredictability, is the same mechanism that makes slot machines so addictive. which means your phone is not a tool, but a psychological trap dressed in the clothing of convenience. And the tragedy is that most people know this, at some level. They feel the compulsive nature of it, the emptiness afterward, the way it replaces real experience with simulated interaction. But they are caught in a cycle where the brain, conditioned to seek the easy high, no longer desires the slow, meaningful work of real engagement. And so they return again and again, feeding the brain what is killing it. Mistaking comfort for health, distraction for peace, entertainment for joy. Now, let us look more closely at what this kind of overstimulation actually does to your cognitive and emotional health. Because while it may feel like nothing more than being online too much, the deeper truth is that you are reshaping your very capacity to think deeply, feel fully, and act freely. You begin to notice that your attention span is shrinking, not just in terms of time but in depth, because your brain, flooded daily with high-intensity, low-effort stimulation, becomes intolerant of slowness, of stillness, of effort without immediate reward. And so books become boring, conversations become a burden, silence becomes anxiety-inducing, and any attempt to engage in real, sustained focus is met with internal resistance that feels almost physical. And emotionally, the same mechanism is at play. Your ability to feel joy, contentment, and even love becomes blunted because your nervous system, trained to respond to dramatic spikes in stimulation, no longer registers subtle emotions as satisfying. And so you become numb to what truly matters, addicted to extremes, and constantly chasing an intensity that real life cannot sustainably provide. This is not merely a psychological inconvenience, it is a spiritual erosion, a diminishment of the soul's capacity to inhabit the present moment, to feel awe, to connect deeply, to suffer nobly, to live meaningfully. Because when your inner world is flooded with noise, there's no room left for the quiet voice of your deeper self to speak. But perhaps the most terrifying consequence of this slow, cumulative poisoning is that you begin to lose trust in yourself, not because you are flawed, but because you have handed the steering wheel of your life to algorithms, habits, and external stimuli. And so your sense of self becomes fragmented, dictated not by your inner values but by what's trending, what's viral, what gets the most likes, and over time you no longer know what you want, only what you've been trained to crave. So what can be done? How can we stop feeding the brain what's killing it slowly? The answer is not in a quick fix or a single decision, but in a radical reorientation of how you relate to stimulation, discipline, and meaning itself. Because the antidote to brain decay is not just avoidance of toxic inputs, but the deliberate cultivation of nourishment, of inner strength, of the difficult but beautiful process of reclaiming your attention, your purpose, and your presence. You must begin to treat your attention as the most sacred resource you have, not because it's rare, but because what you give your attention to, you give your life to. And if you do not decide what to focus on, someone else will decide for you, and they will not choose your growth. They will choose your addiction. You must begin to fast from stimulation, not as punishment, but as purification. Turn off the noise, walk without your phone, eat without distraction. Let yourself feel boredom without immediately fleeing from it, because boredom is not the enemy. It is the doorway to creativity, to rest, to insight, to being with yourself as you are, without the numbing layer of synthetic entertainment. And most importantly, you must begin to feed your brain with what is real conversations that require vulnerability, real books that challenge you to think, real projects that require effort and patience, real moments of silence that allow your soul to breathe. Because these are not luxuries, they are lifelines, and without them, you are slowly starving yourself of what you truly need to thrive. This is not a call to escape the modern world, but to reclaim your place within it, not as a passive consumer, but as a conscious creator of your life, of your habits, of your attention, and ultimately of your identity. You are not broken, you are simply conditioned, trained by a system that profits from your distraction. And once you see that clearly, the path to healing begins, not in guilt or shame, but in radical responsibility, in choosing, moment by moment, what you will and will not feed your mind. This is just the first part